r/AskReddit. Lawyers, what was your "oh damn" moment in court? Never ask a question to which you don't know the answer. Prosecutor suggested to my client that the canned goods he had burgled were to be used to trade for drugs. Me, thinking the idea ludicrous, asked my client whether he has ever traded food for drugs. To which he replied that he once exchanged a frozen chicken for heroin. Needless to say, I didn't win that one. This is so true and sucks so bad in family court hearings because there's so rarely an opportunity to know how the witness is going to testify. I'm guessing you learned that lesson that day? Yeah, learned that you can get some heroin for a chicken. Story from a friend of mine. He was defending a guy in court, don't remember what he was charged with. The main witness for prosecution was on the stand and was asked if she could identify the defendant. She was scanning the courtroom and seemed confused. My friend was already silently celebrating because if she couldn't identify him, he could probably get all charge dropped. As he was mentally adding this case to the win file, he happened to glance over at his client, who had just helpfully raised his hand to make it easier for her to identify him. Even the judge face-palmed on that one. Wow. That's some special kind of stupid. Not oh shit bad, oh shit I can't believe she said that. First jury trial, pretty serious charges. I'm cross-examining the alleged victim, and in answering my question she says, oh yeah, I lie all the time. Needless to say, I won that trial. What if that was a lie? Huh. Mr. Fancy Lawyer Man. Lol, great, that's perjury. Sat in the public gallery at a bail hearing for a man accused of heinous crimes against a very young female relative. The judge started laying out the conditions of bail, and one of them was to surrender his passport. Man turned to his attorney and said, loudly, words to the effect of, but you said I could fly back to my home country. The judge stopped himself and revoked the man's bail. I want to see the attorney's face in that moment. A lawyer I used to know was in court on a work injury case. The judge asked his client, just what is the nature of your injury? His client replied, I can't raise my arm this high anymore, while she raised her arm up to show just how high she couldn't raise it. Fastest case in my life. Dismissed. I was prosecuting a contempt action in family court, something that basically never works, and everyone in the room could tell I was winning. The other side was unprepared, out of arrogance, and I was basically ripping this guy to shreds on cross-examination, which his lawyer didn't even think would happen, because he expected the case to be dismissed. At the end of the trial, the judge ruled for me and stated that she found the defendant's testimony to be untrustworthy. I was shocked at winning a contempt trial to begin with, but then this exchange happened. Defendant's attorney, Your Honor, now that you have found my client's testimony to be untrustworthy, I'm requesting a continuance in order to prepare further witnesses. This concept is shocking in and of itself, because to even think you can bring more witnesses after you rest your case is laughable. Judge, you had your shot and you missed, counsel. Defendant's attorney, Your Honor, there was no way I could have anticipated that you'd find my client's testimony untrustworthy, and as such, I didn't have the opportunity to prepare other witnesses in support of his position. Judge, that may be an argument for your career, counsel, but it holds no water with me. See you this afternoon for sentencing. For those who didn't pick up on it, the judge basically told the lawyer on the record in front of his client that she expects him to get sued for malpractice because he ducked up so royally. That shit was mind-blowing on multiple levels. You should walked across and told the defendant you will take his malpractice suit and win it for him. I was the defendant, representing a non-profit that I volunteered for. The plaintiff was a 60-something grandma who was looking for a retirement settlement after falling out of her jacked-up pickup truck in our parking lot. The premise of her case was that our parking lot was in bad shape, and that she fell into a pothole and broke her leg, which resulted in her having to take Calmedin and diminished her enjoyment of salads at the Friday night fish fry. No, really. It was going along fine until my lawyer put up a photo of the pothole, taken the day of the incident, filled to the brim with water after a recent rain. He asked the lady if she had gotten her foot wet, to which she replied that she couldn't recall. He talked a little more about how perhaps, if her foot wasn't wet, it might have been because she fell out of the truck and didn't really fall into the pothole. He asked again if her foot was wet, and she affirmed that yes, her foot was wet. The oh shit moment came when he went back to his desk, flipped through her deposition and read the part where she was extremely adamant that her foot wasn't wet. Then he did some fancy legal stuff, the case was thrown out, and I went back to work. That's some legally blunt shit right there. Right? Who the hell eats salad at a fish fry? I was the dumbass that almost screwed myself. I had 2 charges in 2 different courts. I accepted the first plea, which almost always carries probation, but my plea didn't have that condition. When it came time to accept the second plea, the prosecutor didn't include probation because she assumed my first charge put me on probation. She said as much to the judge, and me being a big dummy almost corrected her. Never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. Opposing counsel was a nightmare. Everything late, his work was extremely subpar, and so forth. Accused me of lying multiple times when he had dropped the ball. During another hearing in which he did another dumb move, judge says, "I'm glad you are the last case on the call, and all of the other attorneys have left the room, so they aren't here to hear me say that you are a terrible attorney." I cover courts for a local paper, so I see a lot of cases. There are only 2 really bad lawyers I've seen that stand out, and one was almost exactly as you described. He would constantly get things wrong, and then accuse the prosecutor of mixing things up to confuse the jury, or whatever. I swear he appeared to be asleep at one point. Maybe his case was so bad he was angling for poor assistance of counsel, who knows. Person I was representing was on trial for assault in the 3rd degree. In my state, it means you've assaulted an aid worker or police officer and is a felony. The allegations are that he was very verbally abusive to the officers and, at one point, kicked one in the face. We are sitting at the defendant's table and the officer is testifying about the statements my guy made to him, including some pretty horrific name calling. Out of nowhere, my client screams, "You're a ducking liar. Duck you son of a bitch." We lost that trial. I was just interning in court during law school, but I'm a lawyer now. Fight in a club. Someone had broken someone else's jaw and had 6 friends with him that insisted he had been identified wrongly because he never had a beard and the victim said he had a beard. They used a very specific phrasing to the tune of, "My friend doesn't have facial hair because he is a professional in the food industry and it would go against the regulations." After 3 of the witnesses had repeated the same exact phrasing, the judge stopped one to ask if he knew what a couple of the terms in that line meant, and the witness couldn't explain it. Defense lawyer got busted for instructing the witnesses. She'd also gotten the defendant to reject a plea deal that exchanged prison time for a fine and community service. What terms did they have trouble explaining? That's like 6th grade language, tops. It was in Spanish. It sounded weird as duck. He worked in fast food. I was at a hearing arguing that my client was wrongfully terminated because the employer failed to abide by the proper procedures. During the hearing, a witness for the employer tried to offer documents that were fraudulently altered in order to make it look like the proper procedure was followed. I noticed the alteration. Opposing counsel quickly got that witness out of the room, and after a quick adjournment, my client got a large settlement. Watching a hearing, when the defendant said, "I did stab her, but it was a gentle stabbing. He ran into my knife 10 times. not exactly in court. But I was defending a juvenile robbery case where there was very little evidence. There was supposed to be 2 guys, but they only picked up this one kid. He had no stolen property on him. He was picked up like outside his own house, wearing different clothes than the victim had initially said. This kid was on the honor roll at school. His family seemed kind and were involved. He wrote poetry and played instruments. I actually believed it was a legit mistaken identity case. I went to meet with one of the kid's mentors for a character reference. And he exactly matched the description of the other robber. So the homie roll kid was a robber then? Yep, for sure. I should have said the mentor dude had a lot of very specific distinguishing features, where there was like no way it could be a coincidence. I was like, yeah no, not gonna need that reference after all. Thanks for your time, sir. Please stay far away from the courthouse that day. Lawyer here. I had a pre-trial conference at 9 AM at a court about 2 hours away. So I wake my ass up super early to drive in shitty weather to the conference. I get there, and we are waiting for the other, in town, attorney. All the while I'm grumbling to myself about how I'm from out of town and I can still make it on time. Finally the court calls the other attorney's office, and gets a receptionist who tells us through tears that other attorney passed away the night before. Needless to say I was just happy to still be alive, and we rescheduled for a few months later. Rude of him not to inform you he was going to die the night before. I'm not an attorney, but a reporter whose beat is the county courthouse, so I've had plenty of these moments happen in front of me. A guy was convicted of attempting to murder several police officers. At his sentencing, the prosecutor revealed the defendant got a prison tattoo while he was awaiting sentencing of a tombstone with the names of all the cops he attempted to kill. But the defendant still had the audacity to beg for a lenient sentence. He got a few hundred years in jail. This is just an unfortunate birthmark, Your Honor. Represented a pro bono client that had just turned 18 and was charged with serious property damage. I walk into his bail hearing and the judge looks at him and goes, "I knew you'd be back as an adult." The judge then turns to me and says, "Counselor, you may want to learn about your client's history. No bail." I'm not a lawyer, but I was a character witness for my childhood dog in a civil trial between our neighbors and my parents. Opposing counsel was questioning me. I wasn't even out of elementary school at the time, and he asked if our dog was aggressive. She was a Rottweiler and very loving, and incredibly protective of me and my siblings. His final question to me is one I will never forget. He asked, "Did your father tell you what to say before you came into court today?" I responded, "Yes." Then he asked, "What did he tell you to say?" I said, "The truth." Now I was too young to remember the courtroom reaction, but according to my father the judge audibly guffawed, and the opposing counsel lost all the wind out of his sails. Not a lawyer, but a defendant. As a teenager, I got busted with a couple of buddies throwing eggs at cars. We were only actually in the courtroom for our sentencing. There was no trial. The judge called each of us up individually to ask us if we had anything to say. One of my friends tells the judge that he is a good kid who doesn't normally do things like this. Lie, we used to do it all the time, and that I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I wish there was a video of my other friend and I sitting in the benches watching this happen. We simultaneously dropped our heads into our hands because we couldn't believe that idiot just said that. The judge was not pleased, and she took the opportunity to remind him that going to a store, buying eggs, going to another location across town, and then throwing those eggs at cars was not just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.